If you spend enough time watching immigration videos on YouTube, or maybe you're in some online groups about immigration, sooner or later you're going to hear the words mandamus and habeas. Just file a mandamus. Or you need a habeas petition. And I think sometimes the people who are telling other people that you need a habeas petition, they don't know what they're talking about. This video is going to break down exactly what is a habeas action, what is a motion for mandamus, and also what they're not. Okay, first of all, you have to understand, if you're talking about a habeas action or you're going to file a motion for mandamus, you're talking about federal court. You're not talking about immigration court, Executive Office of Immigration Review. You're not talking about USCIS, filing a complaint with them. You're not talking about ICE, CBP. You're talking about federal court. If you're even thinking about doing this, hire an attorney. And not just any old attorney. You need an immigration attorney who has done these before. Because most attorneys don't do immigration work, although I would suspect that they have friends or colleagues that they can refer your case to. But even the immigration attorneys don't do this. At least with the mandamuses, you're kind of at the end of your rope and you've done everything you can do. You've talked to either your U.S. Senator or your representative. You've tried to get them to reach out to immigration to try and do something, and nothing's getting done. That's when you file a mandamus. Well, what is a mandamus? It's a little mnemonic device. Mandamus has the same root as the word mandate, which means to order, okay? Basically, a mandamus, you're asking the federal court to tell immigration you have to do your job. That doesn't necessarily mean that they have to approve the case, but they can't just sit there year after year after year and say, your case is pending, your case is pending, your case is pending. Listen, I'm sure if you guys are familiar with USCIS.gov, you're also familiar with the little tool that they have that you can check, and they'll tell you how long they think a particular type of case, for instance, an I-130 filed by a U.S. citizen for his spouse, how long that should take to get approved, that I-130. It's going to vary from, office to office. So you key in what type of form you're looking at, who it's for, and then you click on it and it'll tell you, oh, these are taking 16 months. If your case has taken 17 months, you're probably not going to get an immigration attorney who's going to say, yeah, you should do this. However, if your case has now taken 24 months or 26 months, and there's no real explanation as to what's taking so long, the attorney can't figure out why would this be taking so long. There's no criminal issue. Is there a temp file someplace? Could be. Does this person actually have two immigration files where they have to consolidate these two together? Has this U.S. citizen petitioned for someone else before, maybe another spouse before, and they want to see that file too? What could possibly be the reason? Sometimes it just fell off the tracks. Sometimes people are just not paying attention to this particular case. Sometimes it's because there's a ban on that country. So they're not really pushing these cases forward because they can't do the adjustment of status anyway, or they can't do the consular processing because of a ban or for some other reason. The attorneys who have a lot more experience in this than you do, or your friends do, or your fellow Facebook people do it, they might have some ideas as to what's causing the delay. But if you go through that entire checklist and there doesn't seem to be any reason for the delay, it might be time for a mandamus. Just so that we're clear about this, what we're talking about is that you're accusing the government of unreasonable delays. This can be in naturalization applications, visa petitions, adjustment of status, green card applications, asylum decisions, FOIAs. I don't know how many of you actually file FOIAs. You can file a Freedom of Information Act request, but sometimes that only takes a couple of months. Sometimes it takes a couple of years. And if the delay is inordinate, then you can file for a mandamus. And I would suspect that we're going to start having more problems with this with pending security checks, because this is a new thing that Trump has come out, and he wants to redo all these frickin' security checks again. So that's going to be another area that people will be filing mandamuses for. But you're not saying to the federal judge, I want you to make the decision. Take this out of the hands of immigration and you make this decision. Judge can't do that. Judge doesn't have jurisdiction to do that. But the federal judge can mandate to USCIS, or to DHS in general, okay? USCIS, the Department of State, they can mandate to different departments and agencies and say, do your job, make a decision. A lot of times, let me just, before I get off of this subject and go on to the habeas, one thing to keep in mind is that people are always worried, well, shit, if I do this, then they might just say, okay, sure, you want a decision? Denied. I'm not that cynical about it. I really do think that most DHS adjudicators are trying to make the correct decision. They do have their tendencies. Some lean more towards the immigrant, some lean more against the immigrant, but I think most of them do try to do the right thing, or what they think is the right thing. However, if somebody were to come to see me, I have retired, by the way, but if last year somebody had come to see me and they say, I want to file a mandamus, blah blah, this is taking too long, and we sit down, we have this long consultation, this 45-minute consultation, and I go through all these different possibilities as what could be causing the delay, I might tell you this is not the time to do it. I might tell you, you have a very iffy case. Yeah, you went to the interview, your marriage interview, 10 months ago, and there's still no decision about this. But you've just told me that your husband has left because the two of you have been having problems. And even though at the interview, you guys were together, really honest to God together, but in the last 10 months, the blank has hit the fan and he's walked out, or he has found somebody else and you found out about it, or whatever, or you're pregnant and oops, it's not his. There's been a real problem with your marriage. Might not be the time to be asking for a mandamus, because they could easily call you back in for another interview, and at this point your spouse says, I'm not going with you, in which case your case is doomed. At this point, at least, if you got an I-130 pending and a 485 pending, you have work permission. So everything is very fact specific. This channel is offered for informational purposes. You need to talk to an immigration attorney yourself to sit down and be very clear about the facts of your case. Just like I just said, if your marriage is on the rocks and you kind of want to get this sped up before, he or she is threatening to divorce it, think twice. They could just decide it on the record that they have, but more likely than not, they're going to call you in for a joint interview. And if your spouse doesn't want to go to that interview, there's going to be a problem. So talk to your own immigration attorney. Find somebody that you like, somebody that your friend suggests to you. I mean, you can find an attorney online. Jim Hacking, for instance, great attorney, has multiple offices across the country, has lots of attorneys working for him. You could find somebody online. However, I often suggest that you should find somebody close to your home. If you're in the Philadelphia region, you should find a Philadelphia lawyer. They're gonna know who is the head of OPLA right now. It's not Kent Frederick anymore. Who's the new one? Or if you're in San Francisco or you're in Hawaii or wherever the heck you are, I always suggest that you find somebody who has a lot of experience in your area, your district office, your court. But if you can't find anybody, online people, if there's somebody that you listen to a lot, not me because I'm retired, but if there's people that you listen to and you trust them and you think they're good people, give them a call, see if you can get a consultation online. Expect to pay for it. Okay? I know, I think a lot of times people think, well, they give all this advice for free, like LaToya McBean does that, and Hacking, I know, does it all the time. Answers all these questions. It's all for free, for free, for free. But scrolling underneath the video is call our office for a paid consultation. Okay, so now let's talk about habeas corpus. It's completely different. This is not about delayed paperwork. This is about unlawful detention. Habeas corpus basically means you must produce the body. And there's a real easy way to remember these. Habeas corpus has corpus right in it, which, you can assume means the body. Mandamus has the same base as mandate, which means you have to do something. Originally, habeas corpus was designed to stop governments from just imprisoning people for as long as they wanted. In immigration, it also refers to bond hearings, which is where you normally find a habeas motion being made. And a habeas petition asks a federal court, why is this person being detained? And is that detention legal? Here are some examples of immigration habeas cases. One, if bond has been denied completely, is if they've been held too long in ICE detention. 3, if U.S. citizens have been wrongly detained by ICE. Some of the habeas cases are mandatory detention challenges. Lastly, the conditions of the confinement claims. So if they're not being given their medication, or there could have been any host of complaints that someone who's being detained might want to bring before the federal court. There's been a couple of Supreme Court cases that shaped immigration habeas law. And one of the most important ones was I'm going to say this wrong, Zaidvidis versus Davis. And that was a real important one. That was for cases where they're being held in ICE detention because no country will accept them. With the Marielitos that came from Cuba in the 80s, after Reagan said, we'll take anybody you've got, and Fidel decided that he's going to open up the prisons. He actually did that, did send a lot of prisoners, former Cuban prisoners to the United States. You'll take anybody? Fine, take these guys. So let's say those Marielitos, and there was about, I heard the number was 12% of the Cubans that came here in the early 80s were actually criminals. Well, criminals will do what criminals do, which is commit more crime. They end up, let's say you have, Jose Santos, who ends up getting locked up again because he's done something that's illegal. Now he gets put through deportation and he is ordered to be deported. But Cuba said, we're not taking him back. We're not taking any of the Cubans back. And sometimes this also falls under people who are stateless, that for some reason they've actually lost their citizenship and they are not considered citizens of any country, and they have no country that will take them. So the Supreme Court basically said, in situations like that, you can't just detain people forever. You're going to have to release them. And that really became a major limitation on ICE's ability to detain people. So can immigrants file these petitions without a lawyer? Absolutely. Prisoners do it all the time. They file their own motions and their own petitions. But you have to understand that, federal law is very procedural. There's two types of law. There's substantive law and there's procedural law. Substantive law is what is the law exactly. Procedural law is what procedures do you have to do to file this correctly. And that's where people get, cases get thrown out of court for technicalities, generally speaking, because the procedures were not followed. If you want to file a mandamus or a habeas, you want to push the federal government to do its job, or you want to push the federal government to explain why this person is still being detained. I would strongly urge you to get an attorney. Get an immigration attorney that has done these types of petitions before. Not all of them have. Make sure if you or your family members are interviewing lawyers to figure out which one you want to have take your case, that should be one of the first questions. How many mandamus petitions have you filed? How many habeas corpus actions have you filed? And see what they say, because you want someone with experience. I would not suggest doing it by yourself. I would not suggest, just look it up on ChatGPT. They'll tell you exactly what to do. You're trying to save some money, but in the end, it can really cost you. So try to find an attorney for these types of petitions and actions. And just to let you know, I'm going to give you a little list. Immigration litigation often involves federal rules, jurisdictional issues. Are you filing in the right jurisdiction? Exhaustion requirements. That means that sometimes you have to exhaust all your other options before you go to the district court or the appellate court. There's filing deadlines. There's service requirements. That's something that a lot of times when people file things on their own, have it be divorce cases, custody cases, whatever, they don't realize that they have to make service on the other party. Well, when it comes to immigration, you still have to make service on the other side, but are you serving the right people? That's where jurisdiction comes in, right? Make sure you know who you have to serve and where that party is located. There might be some sovereign immunity arguments that basically say you can't sue the federal government. And also, you have to think about statutory interpretations. You might have looked something up, or ChatGPT might have given you a case and said, this case is just like your case. Follow this case. But, AI can be wrong. And that case might have been overruled 3 years ago. And ChatGPT, or whichever one you're using, isn't aware of it. It's very different from just filling out some immigration forms. So it doesn't mean that the immigrant's stupid. That, if you were smart, you'd be able to do this on your own. Not necessarily. I know a lot of smart attorneys that are saying, you know what, I'm not touching this stuff. Maybe you shouldn't either. We talked about some of the risks of filing a mandamus. The biggest one being that, you're going to have the federal government order the immigration service to do something, and the easiest thing for them to do is to deny it. So you have to really think twice about whether you want to file a mandamus, because it might generate a denial that if you had just let it go a little bit or a little bit longer, that denial might not have been issued. So let's talk a little bit about the dangers of filing a habeas. Well, number one, it's going to cost you a lot of money. If you use a lawyer, it's going to cost you money. Number two, you could end up still being detained even though you filed. So until it works its way through the court, you're still going to be detained. You have to keep in mind that the courts generally defer to the DHS when it comes to habeas cases. Detention statutes are also very complex. This is why I tell you not to do it by yourself. And on top of that, detention rules change constantly according to various court cases that come out. I mean, they don't have to be just Supreme Court cases that change the way DHS has to do their things. It might be something from the circuit that you're in. You know, if you listen to people online and they'll say, oh, well, this is no problem, you can file a habeas. You know, I live in such and such a state, and we've been having a lot of success with this. Well, you might live in a different jurisdiction, a different state, where they're not having a whole lot of success about this, and you may or may not know what jurisdiction you're in and what the rules are for your particular state. Again, please use an attorney if you're going to do either of these two. One of the things that a good lawyer is going to question, you know, just because you come in and you say, I want you to file a habeas action for me, the attorney doesn't just say, okay, I think I'll do that. They're going to ask certain questions, and one of them is this person even eligible for a habeas action? Another one is, there's some kind of hidden derogatory information that you're not being told. You know, a family member might go in and talk to an attorney and say, you know, my uncle, let's say, is, you know, he's a great guy and he's being held in detention and they're not letting him out, and he's never had any other problems that we know about, and there's no reason why this should happen. Well, they may or may not know other bad things that this guy has done. Maybe this guy has had multiple convictions that the family member is either keeping from the lawyer or frankly just doesn't even know about it, has never known that this person had another conviction in some other, maybe they lived in Florida for a while. They had some convictions down there. A lawyer is going to ask, will this litigation make things worse instead of better? You know, the decision to file a habeas or a mandamus is pretty complicated. And if I were you, I would listen to what your attorney says. If you completely disagree with the attorney, get a second opinion. Go have a consultation with another attorney that is recommended to you, someone that you respect, and see what that person says. I just saw somebody up on Facebook maybe a week or two ago. She had gone to see 3 or 4 immigration attorneys, and she didn't agree with what they were saying. This was a case where the person had been ordered deported and then re-entered the United States, and now was married to a U.S. citizen and wanted to file an I-130 petition and adjustment of status. Well, number one, that's a felony. If you have a deportation order and you leave the United States under that order, or you self-deport, and then you come back, EWI, meaning entered without inspection, that's a felony. And you're not adjusting your status anytime soon, and you sure as heck don't want to go to a marriage interview because they're going to arrest you. And anyway, this person she just didn't want to hear it. You know, she's like, I don't understand why we can't file for him. So if you get a second opinion and it's the same as the first opinion, if you want to get a third opinion, go right ahead. You can get a fourth, a fifth, and a sixth opinion. Sooner or later, you might find somebody that will take this and do it. But then don't be surprised when the case gets denied. And you said, yeah, but I paid him $10,000. He said if I paid $10,000, he'd be able to get this approved. Don't be surprised if it gets denied, because you've already had other very talented, skilled, educated immigration attorneys tell you this isn't going to fly. You're going to keep looking and looking until you find somebody who says, yeah, I could do that for you. Sooner or later, you will find that person. Should you use that person? In my ever so humble opinion, no, do not. But as an attorney told me a long time ago when I was just a law student, I was a paralegal and I was in law school at the time. In fact, we were doing amnesty cases and we had this deadline. We got to get this stuff filed, And, I told them, I keep calling these people and they're saying they're going to come in and bring their evidence, but, they haven't shown up and the deadline's on Monday and blah, blah, blah. And he says, Bev, you can't save the client from the client. That's just a fact. Clients are going to do what they want to do. So all I can do is offer you my best advice. If you go get a second or third opinion and it's the same as the first opinion, trust them. Believe them. Save your money. Don't keep looking for somebody who's going to do what you want them to do, because what you want them to do might not even be possible. Hit subscribe if you want to get more explanations as to what all these things are that immigration attorneys talk about. Subscribe, because that's basically what I do here. I talk about a lot of different things about immigration, but the lane I've decided to take is to be the person that when you don't understand what somebody's saying, for instance, one of my most popular videos is about the NTA, because lawyers talk about the notice to appear all the time. You're going to be issued a notice to appear. You're going to be issued a notice to appear. Well, I sat down and I did a video about what the heck is a notice to appear. It's the charging document, by the way. That's the type of stuff I like to do. And of course, I'm going to have to do something about this policy memo that came out. Well, it was issued, I think, on the 21st of May. It came out on the 22nd. And I am going to do something about that because everybody is all panicked and there's a lot of misinformation about what this means. But I wanted to give it a couple of days until people have calmed down and we have a clear understanding of what this actually means. And that's it for right now, and thank you so much. Please hit subscribe. I'm looking for subscribers. I think I have like 136, maybe, somewhere thereabouts, which is not many. I only started this May 1st of 2025, so it's been a slow go. I'm doing it exactly the way they tell me to do it, which is organically, not buying subscribers. I'm not looking for clients. I haven't shared it on my Facebook page. I'm just trying to let YouTube do its thing, and I'd love to have you subscribe or hit like or leave a comment. It really does help the algorithm to get this information out to more people. Thank you so much, and I'll talk to you later.